Next, the intention of the commander, insofar as its communication is essential to the accomplishment of the end sought. What is that? It's mission. So we've got situation, mission. We've got literally the exact same thing. Execution is what we have next, and theirs is missions for the elements of the whole command. What's that? Yeah, that's the execution. That's what we're actually going to do. For America, we have admin and logistics next, and they have orders for the light motorized columns, the field trains and baggage trains, the battle echelon, and the remaining reserve elements insofar as this is of importance to the troops. So what's that? It's all the logistics. It's all the admin.
Yeah.
And the last one we have is command and signal, which is how you're going to communicate and where, this is when you'd be briefing. You'd say, hey, as the task unit commander, I'm going to be on this ridge line. So we have command and signal. And the last thing that they say is command post and communications to and from.
I wonder where we got SMEAC from.
So there's the origination of SMEAC. It's it comes from the Truppenführung. That's where we got it.
So good, man. How this book has escaped like my junior officer training. You know what I mean? Like
that's what we're trying to solve right now.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to solve. We can't solve it. We can't go back in time, but I promise you there are NCOs out there. I talk to them all the time. There are junior officers out there. I talk to them all the time. They send me messages. There are battalion commanders that go through this and listen to it. So we're good.
Yeah.
We're taking care of the problems of the past. This is absolutely true. That's why I'm sitting here. It's literally why I'm sitting here, because I get a damn email or I get a message from a Marine Corps second lieutenant that's in the game, or I get a letter from an Army sergeant that's leading a squad and is like, "Thank you, got it."
I got to admit, when I was a junior officer, I was so busy, rabbit ears, you guys can't see that, like with whatever I was tasked with.
Yep.
I never had time to read a book like this. I read what books I was basically forced to read, and I got through them as best I could. And the best leaders made me do those things because I was so darn busy. It wasn't a priority to me at 23 years old to do that. But, man, some of these things I've learned firsthand. And, like, as you're reading them, I'm like, I absolutely know this to be true. But I learned it, like, by actually touching the hot stove myself,
Well, Dave Burke was talking about it when he was at the basic school. He's like, they gave him a stack of manuals and said, read the manuals. But the problem is you don't have the context around them.
Yeah.
So that makes it much, much harder to read.
It's like distant. You don't really.
And even for me, when I'm reading something with all the context I have around it, like when I read it, like when I first started reading books that I knew I was going to do on the podcast, it gave me a new level of appreciation for what I was reading, because I was like, oh, okay. So here's how I'm going to describe this to everyone. Because just like we were talking about written versus email versus verbal, right? When you read the written word, it's different than when someone is putting the influence on the right spot, right? When you're using the tone and all that stuff. And I mean, that's coming from Colonel William Reeder, who I was reading his book to him on this podcast. And he's like, this is very emotional for me because I haven't, read this book since I wrote it. And it's very hard to listen to. It's like, yes, when you add the voice, there's something more to it. And then when you have someone that's a knuckle dragger like me that says, "Oh, here's what we're talking about here. Here's what this actually means. Here's what this translates to on the battlefield, in the boardroom somewhere. Here's the way it actually works." So that's what's good. Even though we didn't get the ideal training, we can give it to them now.
Yeah. And I think it's so important. We talk about training and how important training is for preparation. Like, at the very least, hey, you got to read this book. At the very least, okay, I mean, in the absence of that, it's like a complete failure. But at least, you read these books. But you've got to find the time to do the training. Read the books. And then as a leader, sit down, okay, what does that really mean? When we go out and we operate in this way, what are the lessons from this book that we can apply?
Yeah.
Really do it.
Yeah. It's like, for me, when I was reading About Face, and I read About Face like when we were in Ramadi. I read it for the first time. I'm not sure, 100% sure when I read it for the first time, but I knew that when I brought it to Ramadi, I was like, that's the only book I brought with me.
Wow.
And the thing is, I would read that to fall asleep, right? I just get up to my room. I would open up to a random page because I've read it enough times that I don't need to read it from cover to cover. But I'd open up to a random page and I'd be like, oh, this is what I'm experiencing right now. Oh yeah, okay. He experienced the same thing. I remember one of the first nights I was there, flipped it open, and I start reading it. And what it's saying is they're working with the South Vietnamese military. And the South Vietnamese military was untrained, unequipped. Mm-hmm. They were totally devoid of any kind of ethics in terms of money, and it was corrupt. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, okay. So in Vietnam, they were dealing with the exact same thing that we're dealing with here. Okay, cool. Here, let's look at how he dealt with it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Look, that's the person that actually made me say, okay, the Iraqi soldiers are not going to be like us. They have a different culture. They run things a different way. It's not wrong. It's just different from the way we do things. The classic case is the Iraqi officers skimming money off the enlisted guys' paychecks.
Right.
And to us, this is like a total sin, right? The ultimate sin. You're going to steal money from your enlisted troops. For them, the enlisted guys, that's what they expected.
Yeah, they totally
he's the boss.
Yeah.
Hey, he's going to take a little bit. He's going to take his little cut. Of course, he's the boss. Right. What are we doing? He's still generous to us. He's not taking all of it.
Right.
And we had to get that through our minds. That their attitude, they're culturally different. And so if we waste a bunch of time trying to sort out their pay, they're all looking at us going, "What are you doing? Why are you trying to create a conflict with us? I'm the boss. Right. I'm going to take my cut. What are you talking about?"
Right.
To them, it's just as simple as
that's
just how it is.
Yeah.
And so for me, like reading About Face, that was the book that really tuned me into, okay, there are lessons here. I mean, that's why I named Tasking a Bruiser, because that's what Hackworth did. 100% stolen from Hackworth. 100%. But all the little things Cover and Movie talks about in there. Talks about decentralized command all the time. Talks about all those things are in there. It's not even a leadership book. It's all in there though. Mm-hmm. So yes, these types of situations where the other thing that happens is everything we've said so far, right? Just every topic that we've talked about is in extreme ownership. It's in the dichotomy of leadership. It's all in there. But all of it is a different angle. And just like when you experience the same thing, but from a little bit of a different angle, you know it better.
That's right.
You know it. If I teach you an arm lock, and then Dean teaches you an arm lock, and then Andy teaches you an arm lock, you got a little something different from each one of us. It's just a little different sign, a little different movement, and you get better at it. Same thing happens here. You hear that same message, maybe in a little different way, maybe a little different spin on it, maybe shown in a different scenario. You actually learn from it, and that's what's important. Because the more variations of the same thing you've seen, the better you understand it. And it makes you that much better. And if you know the way broadly, you see it in all things. And the more you see it, the more you know it. Mm. So, yes, that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. Continuing on. Suppositions and expectations are to be so indicated. Reasons for the measures ordered belong only exceptionally in the order. Detailed instructions covering all possible contingencies, which are matters of training, do not belong in an order. It's interesting they say suppositions and expectations. What do we call those in the military? We call them assumptions.
We just talked about that too.
Yep.
We lied.
It is often suitable to issue a warning order. Warning order informs the latest developments of the situation. It is used to effect with the most urgent preparations. Likewise, it is used to permit the troops to come to rest earlier and also permit them to plan to rest longer. So, warning order, something that we also use. Another section here. When an order or report is transmitted orally, the one bearing the order or report must repeat it to the issuing person. A person transmitting a written report should be instructed as to its contents insofar as conditions permit. Officers transmitting orders should, as a rule, be instructed as to the tactical situation. It's funny, even in the teams, when someone says peel right, everyone repeats the call. You repeat it back to the person that just told you, and then you repeat it to the next person. The place of the commander and his staff. This is the next section we're going into. The personal effect of the commander on the troops is of great importance. He must be near the fighting troops. The choice of location for the corps commander should be based upon the requirement of the establishment of rapid and continuous communication to the divisions and the rear. He cannot rely along technical communications, meaning telephone wires and all that. We can do better with this now, but back in the day, and even so, there's nothing that beats face-to-face. Nothing beats face-to-face. Great distance, in spite of adequate communication facilities, lengthens the command and report lines, endangers the system, and may lead to late reports and orders or even failure of arrival. Moreover, great distance makes difficult personal terrain study and a personal knowledge of the progress of the battle. The division commander belongs with his troops. Boom. Don't get so detached. This section is called, and I just jumped through a bunch of really granular tactical stuff. If you're military, good stuff to read. Going to jump through it. This section is called attack, which is just worth covering in its own right. The attack is effected through movement, fire, thrusts, and through the direction in which it is directed. The attack can be directed from one direction against the front, but ordinarily the greatest strength is launched against the flank or the rear of the enemy. Moreover, an attack can be launched from several directions with a breakthrough of the hostile front. New attack directions are provided. So when you flank someone, guess what? There's going to be other opportunities that appear. The frontal attack is the most difficult of execution, yet it is the most frequent. The outflanking attack is more efficient than the frontal. Simultaneously, outflanking of both enemy flanks presumes considerable superiority. An envelopment of one or both hostile flanks and reaching deep into his rear can lead to the annihilation of the enemy. This is something that's very tricky because we talk about envelopment of the enemy, which means surrounding the enemy, and in a small, that's cool if you're in a battalion or bigger, and actually I want to say brigade or bigger, like we're talking massive battlefield movements, because if you have a company of soldiers, 150 soldiers, and you envelop the enemy, guess what you're doing?
You spread thin. Well,
not only you spread thin, when you surround an enemy, you are all pointing your weapons at yourselves. Mm-hmm. That's the real problem. Yeah. So we ran into this a lot in the teams where guys would want to surround a target, and there's it's problematic. It's very problematic. You have to. That's why the classic L-shaped, right, whether ambush or L-shaped assault. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why the guys in Vietnam taught us to do that.
Right.
Because as long as you know what your fields of fire are, you can go hot if you're in an L-shaped ambush or you're in an L-shaped assault. The minute I put people, whether it's 270 degrees around a target or 360 degrees, I have to worry about my backdrop, and it's a real problem. And you know what? You can get away with those. You can get away with enveloping a target all day long as there's no shooting. But the minute the enemy starts shooting, it's a problem. So there are ways to cover exits from an L. You extend that a little bit. You can put some overwatches in, but it is a real problem to think that you're going to envelop a target in a small, let's say with direct fire weapons, company size or smaller, it's a real problem to think you're going to be able to envelop a target and not have a problem